I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding of even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, good or evil, right or wrong. And I met this 6-year-old child with a blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized what was living behind those eyes was purely evil.
Hello and welcome to another episode of What If It's Cool, the show where we talk about anything and everything that is cool in the world today. I am the thing that goes bump in the night, Daniel Paul Crow. With me is the creature from the Yarra River, Tim. And because Chip B is out making a mixtape somewhere, we got to get him back on soon. We have the lab experiment gone wrong. Our mate from across the pond, Ewan. How we going, boys?
Hi.
I actually like that one, Dan. That one was pretty good.
I love the costumes as well, guys. They're great, yeah. Timmy, you got your Jack Burton outfit on. That's great. Dan, Bricktop from Snatch. Amazing.
Yep, thank you.
Great callback.
Thank you. Well, your sexy nurse outfit is awesome, mate.
I was going to say, well, this is just my general Saturday morning outfit, so, you know, it's comfy. Yeah. I like to be comfy during a podcast.
Well, this is our Halloween episode, and it is, well, it's appropriate what we're doing. We are doing the two sort of reboots of the Halloween franchise. We're going to be tackling Halloween H20. Which was released in, was it 97 or 98? I've already forgotten now. 98, thank you. And Halloween 2018. So, without further ado, we are going to firstly tackle the original sequel, Halloween H20. Tim, can you just give us a rough summary of the story, please?
Yeah, I'm going to be lazy here. I'm just going to go read the summary on Google.
And you give me so much crap when I read the cast list. Thanks, bud.
Well, I asked you to give a summary once, and then you decided to give us a play-by-play of every single scene of the movie. In the interest of time, I think it would be good if I just read this summary.
All right, go for it, bro.
After escaping serial killer Michael Myers' attacks, Laurie Strode relocates to California and adopts a new identity. However, years later, Michael returns to finish what he started. Absolutely compelling.
Da, da, da.
Yes. So it's got the well, you know what? Like, after all of the other sequels, this is probably not that bad a title. Halloween H20, 20 years later. To remind you that this is taking place 20 years after the Carpenter Classic.
Yeah.
Initial thoughts, gentlemen.
Well, I only recently watched this, and I've heard bits and pieces about it being somewhat okay, somewhat bad. Me personally, I like this one. I saw the second Halloween for the first time this week because I was reading on Wikipedia that this is a direct sequel to the second one, and I didn't know much about the Halloween franchise until the 2018 movie, so my knowledge of it was just like, yeah. And I like this story. It's got a little bit of jump scares, which is great. It flows a lot better than the other sequels. I think it's a great film, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that it's like a point that has been made. It is very much a product of its time. So with Scream having come out a couple of years prior, it does have that glossiness to it. I want to say, like, I think that it does have a glossiness, and it also feels very compact as a movie. Like, it's very fast. Like, this movie, I think, clocks in at under 90 minutes. So it doesn't really waste much time in getting from point A to B. It's got, like a lot of hallmarks of movies from back then. Like it has the horny teens. Like
the classic horny teens.
Yeah, like it adheres to a lot of the traditional horror rules, which was helpfully laid out for us in Scream a couple of years prior. So, like, just in that sense, yeah, like it does a pretty serviceable job of being a movie that's, like reflective of that time when there's a resurgence, certainly, of slasher films in the late 90s.
It certainly is a lot more over the top and in your face than say the original films or the other Halloween, which we'll go on to speak to about the 2018 version. It's, as Timmy was saying, very glossy. They don't pull any punches when it comes to the violence. It's not about so much the bringing up of tension through sort of the waves and troughs, and the stalker action, which is sort of so paramount to the effect of the original. It's all very quick and it's all very clean. It's kind of like the big band version of the original. It's all very loud. Even the music is got a full orchestra behind it. It's got lots of self-reference to itself and to Scream. So it's kind of like a cycle. In Scream was referencing Halloween, and now we've got Halloween referencing Scream, referencing Halloween. It sort of eats itself in its postmodernism.
But they also showed a bit with on the telly. It had I Know What You Did Last Summer, which I think came out the year prior to that, and I thought that was a good callback because I did get that Scream feel. But I was like, why wouldn't you put the Scream? And then I realized different studios. So
Was it I Know What You Did Last Summer, or was it Scream?
Yeah, because it was Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Sarah Michelle was in Scream 2 as well.
Was she?
Yep.
Oh, maybe I got it wrong.
Was it actually made by the same studio which made Scream? So I noticed from watching Scream this week as well, that Scream's made by Dimension. Is this a Dimension production?
Yes.
Can anyone look that up for me?
It was Miramax.
So.
Miramax did
Miramax.
This one.
Yeah. So and did Miramax do Scream as well? I think.
Yeah. This was released, I think, by Miramax, but production company says here Dimension Films as well.
Yeah. So there's obviously there's a lot of production similarities between the two. They probably have sort of fairly similar budgets, and they have very sort of similar ways in which they're filmed. The universe feels very sort of similar. You've got a sort of Brat Pack cast full of young up-and-coming actors who are still quite recognizable now, some more successful than others, and lots of cameos and drawbacks to other films in the genre, not just Halloween, but all kinds of other films.
I love the fact that the opening credits has Jordan Gordon-Levitt's name in it. He's in it for 3 minutes, and that's it. Why would you give him a credit?
I think you meant Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Oh, I put Jason. Oh, my God.
We know who you mean. We know who you mean.
Yeah, we know. It's not like I said he's my favorite actor or anything. So
no. We're not going there.
He has like a pivotal sort of part in that first opening credit scene. It's sort of in the same vein as is it Drew Barrymore in Scream gets knocked off in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, and she's still got her name on there.
You know, and she's the poster person for that movie. So I think that it's quite fun to knock off somebody who's quite famous and well known, because I mean he'd been on TV. He was on Third Rock of the Sun at that point, and I think that was at the height of their success with that show, because I think it wrapped up maybe 2 or 3 years after this movie came out.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and like you were, I think offline, Dan, you were saying that a bunch of these movies from Scream onwards, they all had a tendency to use people who'd been quite successful or quite at least recognizable from TV.
But all these horror movies had people from but they were all from the same show. They were all from Dawson's Creek. So this one had Michelle Williams.
Michelle Williams only, dude. That was the. Everyone from Dawson's Creek in this.
No. What I'm saying is, like, there was a trope of like all these horror movies that people were going. People from Dawson's Creek were doing, and the other one that comes to mind, The Faculty, had Josh.
Josh Hartnett.
No, not Josh Hartnett. The guy who was in Mighty Ducks as well, but it doesn't matter. We're getting off topic.
I get what you're saying. I think was it Nev Campbell who's in Scream. Not to keep on bringing Scream up, but I think it is so relevant to this film that it's pretty much you can't sort of speak about them in any detail without sort of running one into another. But Nev Campbell from Scream was in Party of Five. So it is
same
a
era.
sort of a talent pool to go through those teenage TV
Stars.
shows, sort of semi-soap TV shows, to use those actors and put them in a more adult setting where they're being stalked.
Well, one cameo that was in this movie that I don't know if you guys noticed it. It wasn't until he just came straight on the screen and went, "Holy crap!" The character Charlie was played by the same kid who played the younger version of Alan in Jumanji.
Yes.
I wondered where he went, because I never saw him in another movie, and I was like, I know him. Okay, moving on.
Yes. He grew up to be a very horny teenager in this movie, apparently.
Yes.
The guy makes so many references to sex and orgies and whatever it is that they want to do. Like even Michelle Williams' character Molly, she says to him that he needs like a hormone suppressant. But like with using these teen stars, point I was trying to make before was that they're just so recognizable. So if you've seen them from the famous TV productions that they'd been part of, then it would have, by extension, an inbuilt audience, people who would want to see them in these sorts of movies, and they're very entertaining. A lot of the horror movies from the late '90s were very entertaining to watch. It became a regular thing. I know I've said Scream, but of course you've got Scream 2. I Know What You Did Last Summer. I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, and then you've got this little gem.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a product of its time, and
yeah, of course,
it had a resurgence and that idea of being a bit more knowing than those early slasher movies from the late 70s and 80s, the sort of video nasty ones, which were very much sort of one note. Here's our characters. Let's take them out one by one. In these films of the late 90s, mid 90s and late 90s, the characters themselves sort of know that they're in horror movies, so act accordingly and try and avoid those cliches. But of course, by doing that, they end up recreating those cliches in new ways.
Yeah, this is a really good movie in terms of how it references its roots in the horror genre and the fun cameos that it has peppered throughout. You've got Nancy Stevens, who plays Nurse Marion Chambers. So she's from the original Halloween films. And for her to be brought back in for this, it really addresses the horror film roots. Well, this particular movie, obviously, it carries quite the lineage. It has the name Halloween, so it wants to do it justice and bringing her back, but only to kill her off, makes me question whether it was really justified to have her there in the first place.
One thing, did you guys notice when she was walking off, in the background, the music, it had a little bit of the Psycho theme in it?
Oh, well, that was Janet Leigh from Psycho.
Yeah, that would have been Janet Leigh.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so Janet Leigh from Psycho, who is also Jamie Lee Curtis's mum. She has a fun little cameo as the receptionist for Jamie Lee Curtis's character's principal. And another little fun bit which I sent to you boys offline was the fact that she was driving the car from Psycho as she finished off her scene.
Yeah, I noticed that. That was on top of playing the theme music, sort of a couple of bars of it in the soundtrack. I'm not sure if the cameos from the nurse and from Vivian were entirely essential to the plot, but they're good fun, and I think that's very much what this film's about. It's more of a celebration, I think, of a legacy of. We've had 11 movies now. Number 3 is kind of off the Michael Myers storyline, but we're talking about a single low budget horror movie which has spawned multiple sequels. A lot of the mileage from those sort of 11 films, obviously with more or less degrees of success, is very much the conventions which were put in place by that first film. And I think that this film is just having a lot of fun. It's adding obviously 90s sensibilities by the truckload, but it's still sort of doing lots of nods and having a lot of fun by calling up some of these tropes from the original film, which sort of became mainstays in the slasher genre. I was sort of noting some down. And also other horror movies as well. It just pulls in references from everywhere. There's showers in the background, which is, in several scenes, which is a sort of a Psycho reference. There's a line from one of the characters where they say, "Oh, well, you'll grow up and open a hotel with your mother," which is just another Psycho reference. I think there's a sort of standard bit in a horror movie where one of the characters is looking in the bathroom mirror, and then closes the mirror to reveal a different background. But of course, there's nothing in the background, which is a callback to, I think, American Werewolf in London.
We've got to talk about that movie one of these days.
I've still not watched that one. I've got to get on top of that one.
You bought it for my birthday. Timmy, you have to watch this. Okay. But the movie itself, I think one of the things that as fun as it is for it to have all these Easter eggs throughout and to really celebrate the slasher genre as a whole, I really didn't appreciate the fact that it had just so many jump scares. So you have a lot of false jumps thinking that you're going to see the killer, but in fact it's some person just jumping there, and then of course the music just shoots right up and it turns out that it's not actually Michael.
But that was a trope in the 90s anyway. Like, I think Scream were one of the biggest ones that did it, and I know for a fact, I know what you did last summer. Definitely they did that pretty much every 20 minutes. Every couple of minutes.
Absolutely.
They do that.
But it's also jarring. It's so jarring that it actually takes you away from the movie. I mean, one of the things that I like about horror... Yeah, but having said that, even though it is a product of its time, it actually distracts from the movie as a whole. So, like, in that sense, I find that it's weak.
I find that it's a bit overused. So I do agree with you, Tim. I also think the way that those jump scares needs to be a bit more intuitive. One of the best elements of the first movie is that there's actually not a huge amount of comparatively violent scenes or death scenes, and a lot of the effect of the film is building up tension. And when it does resort to jump scares, they're far more effective because of the lead into the jump scare has sort of lulled the viewer into a false sense of security, where in this Millennium one, they're just chucked in left, right, and centre, with sort of no difference of the pacing of the film. So that you sort of, well, that was just a jump scare which I just wasn't even ready for, but it didn't make me jump.
Yeah, it was just adding them in. Like every few scenes or so, you would have them. It started right at the beginning, and then I guess it sort of feeds in for some of it. It definitely feeds into Laurie's fear of the fact that it is Halloween. It's a time of year that she does have a certain apprehension to, but at the same time, it doesn't. There's no build. There hasn't been a successful enough build, and that's probably one of the things that is wrong with this in terms of keeping it at such a short runtime. They've peppered it all out. They don't give themselves enough room to actually build to sufficient scares and featuring Michael too.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that the 2018 does better than this movie, and I said this to you off camera, Tim, that the way that it deals with the mental health of Laurie, I think this one, they don't do it really justice. I mean, it's kind of like she's already got her stuff sorted and she's fine. But in reality, if somebody had gone through that kind of crap, I don't think you could be that well adjusted. The first thing that she does is she's like to reveal herself to her boyfriend. She's just calm and deadpan. I'm like, if I was doing something like that, I'd be in tears, and I'm just like, this is what happened, this is what I'm doing now, and help me. But she was just like, yeah, I'm calm and collective. That's the biggest thing I didn't like about this movie, is that it just
yeah, it's alarmingly well adjusted. When you compare it to the 2018 approach, where she's we'll get into this later, but she's obviously been preparing for that day for some time. This is a person who's actually very ill prepared. I think what it's trying to reflect is that she's been running from this for so long, and the fact that she's taken up a new identity is indicative of that. she has run away. She has hidden herself away from Michael, but, you know, lo and behold, 20 years later, he does manage to track her down.
Yeah.
She's got a lot more closure at the beginning of the film, not to be contradictory, but she kind of thinks that Michael is dead because he burned, in inverted commas, at the end of Halloween 2. So she's not really expecting him to come back as much as she is in the newer version, where Michael's obviously still alive, although incarcerated. I think there's a lot of attention made to, you know, the fact that she's jumpy and she's scared. She jumps especially from children. Children scare her about 3 or 4 times in the sort of early scenes, and she's put some of this neurosis onto her son by being overprotective.
Yeah, and he actually references that she's a functioning alcoholic.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That there's a good scene when she's when her sort of new prospective boyfriend goes off to the bathroom where they're having a sort of a date, and she orders a quick couple of wines while he's not there.
Here's one thing about that scene that I don't know if you guys noticed this, but this is just me because I used to really love drinking. 10 years sober, thank you. in that she's drinking white wine, but in the 2018 she's drinking red wine. Pointless fact, but I just thought I'd bring it up.
Her taste has matured over time. I think that's a good observation. This is the evolution of Laurie Strode. She's gone from white to red. Fantastic.
I just thought I'd throw that in there.
I mean, in the original Halloween, she is very jittery in the early scenes as well. She's kind of the sort of school nerd kind of character. I mean, she finds the strength within herself in those later scenes to survive and to keep the kids alive. But I do think that there's something to be said about the characterization of her in this late 90s version. To me, it rings quite true in terms of the continuity of the character, that she would grow up to be a school teacher or something in that kind of field. And I think entirely plausible that she would sort of try and bury that stuff, but of course it would come out in other ways in terms of drinking, generally being quite scared, falling onto passing on the neurosis into her son and being overprotective, etc.
Well, the nightmares at the start of the movie when she's screaming like that, you can only go through that if you've gone through something like that traumatic, you know.
I agree. The shooting, the way that the nightmare sequence was shot at the start, did you guys get a sense of, like, it's almost like a very music video type approach? I don't know, like it had something about it, some quality in the way that it was shot. The first person perspective thing as well, the way that it moves through and then, you know, the doors open. Like, I thought it was quite inventive, but also a bit too in your face in a way, because, and especially the way that the scene plays out, you know, like it's obviously going into her office, and then you get to see, you know, the blackboard with something that says literature on it, and then, you know, you see the picture of Josh Hartnett. Then after that, you know, camera turns, and then, you know, you see the knife through Josh Hartnett's picture, and then you see Laurie Strode neatly written on the blackboard. I was just like, I don't know, it just had a very corny feel to it for me.
It's over the top, but I think they've made a stylistic decision to make it that way. And of course, again, it's sort of in keeping with its time, and that was stylistically what was expected about in sort of slasher teen horrors coming out around that time. It's reflected in most of the ways that the film is made, the film is shot, where it's styled, and the way that it's cut, and the music too, which I was talking about a little bit earlier. It is the big band version, and I mean that's the choice. I mean, it's different in terms of pacing, and it almost makes it a different film and an entirely different beast from the first movie or Carpenter's version or the newer version. I mean, it's everywhere, isn't it? It's kind of almost personified in Michael Myers' mask, which is really clean and it's really neat. Whereas in the first movie and then in the latest movie, it's a really trashy mask. It's covered in dirt and it's all scarred up and it's not perfect. Everything in this is perfect. The makeup is perfect. The framing is all very clean, and I see where you're going with the music video. It's very sort of, it feels a lot sort of more TV than sort of gritty indie horror.
Especially the billowing curtains.
I love
billowing curtains, you know, like that's what I was just sort of thinking, you know. I just sort of thought, well, this wouldn't be out of place, you know, in like say a Janet Jackson video clip or something like that. Well, if we're going to talk about music, I did like the fact that it started with Mr. Sandman. You know, you've got a very catchy jingle that plays, and then it's abruptly cut off because Michael's broken into this lady's place, and then, well, you know, with the dream sequence actually turns out to be a nightmare. And then some of the imagery in the nightmare ends up becoming the reality later on, which I thought was quite, you know, like, again, it's over the top, but again, very fitting for the movie that this is.
Do you think that, I can't remember what iteration we are by this film. It must be sort of Halloween 7 or 8 or something like that.
7.
The film, yeah. So the filmmakers are sort of saying, well, you know, we've done the traditional slow indie gritty horror version of this to death. Excuse the pun. Let's make it a bit more cleaner, and let's see, you know, what we can do if we approach it from a different way. I particularly think of the way that Michael is portrayed in this. There's actually a lot more of him in the early one, and to a degree in the latest one. He's used very sparingly, and you only kind of really see him as a shoulder up until the final scenes. You kind of see him as a shoulder or a side or a foot, or, you know, partial clips. But in this one, he's very much in camera a lot of the time, and he's very much visible looking through windows. He's kind of playing peekaboo. Especially
at the guardhouse where he's just sort of,
yeah, he's sort of here, he's there, he's everywhere. It's like, where's Michael? You know.
I think he was more menacing in the original, you know, like, so he was definitely more of a menace, and the way that he was cruising around town in the car, and then the Halloween theme would play, you know, it was almost like Jaws, or, well, what Jaws would be later, you know, a few years after Halloween came out. You know, you'd hear that theme music, and then you knew that the shark was around. Well, whereas in Halloween, you knew that, yeah, Michael was definitely around. Rather than, you know, with this, I think they wanted to. They must have thought that a more is more approach would be suitable to show the killer that much more. Whereas in the original, what was disturbing about it is the over the shoulder shots that you were referencing, Yui. The fact that makes it more intimate. You know, that draws the audience in. The audience then must feel like they're participating somewhat in these heinous acts.
I agree. I think the stalker cam is one of the most effective techniques that they use in the first one, and it's mimicked in what we talk about. It's mimicked in the newer one as you explore the spaces of Haddonfield, and the camera does this sort of slow pan following of the teenagers through sort of leafy suburbs. You get a sense that you are with Michael, you are stalking with him, and so in a way you are sort of participating with him, and there's a real kind of dread and suspense which is built up with that.
Yeah, it's more disturbing because you know that pretty soon he's going to be doing something that's like quite horrific. And yeah, I'm very much a fan of that particular approach. I think it's the subtlety that's missing from the H20 version.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it makes up for it in other ways. As I say, you do get to see a lot more with him, but then because of that, you get to have a lot more sort of fun with him throughout the film. It's not all just about building to a sort of a big poster ending. It's you know, there's a lot of action, and the film does have good pacing, and it's quite brutal. I mean, really full on in many ways. It's kind of almost the sort of the poster glossiness of it sort of takes away from some really rather nasty pieces of violence through the film.
Well, when he impales Will Brennan and then lifts him up, you know, like, and he's just there, like just shaking, you know, like while he's got a knife in his back. I was like, that is really gruesome.
Yeah.
But look, I think we've found quite a few things that we liked with this, but you know, like, of course, this episode, Dan, that you've set up for us, we're going to be discussing also the 2018 version.
Just before we cut into 2018, this is just how sick my mind is. I just wanted John, or played by Josh Hartnett, who is...
To get a haircut?
I love him. No. I just wanted him to just say one thing, because whenever Michael would come into a scene, I just wanted him to say, "Oh, hi, Uncle Mike," or "Don't kill me, Uncle Mike." I just wanted that. I don't know why, but I just really wanted that. Just to bring the whole family together.
I think, didn't they do something like that in the Friday the 13th series?
I don't know, but I just really wanted it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. At the end of the day, Michael just wants hugs.
Can I mention what I really liked about this film was the bit where I think it's Josh Hartnett and Michelle Williams are running up to the front door, and it's kind of a mirror of the first film where Laurie's not got can't get into the front of the house because she hasn't got the keys, and Michelle Williams drops the keys, and so that she can't get in the front door, but they're sort of stuck in between the front door and this sort of gate, which Michael can't get in because he doesn't have the keys until he notices the keys are on the floor. I thought that was really nicely put together as a sequence.
Yeah, there was a lot of good callbacks.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a twist of that first movie's. So it was kind of a twist of that first movie, and then so when Michael finally gets the keys in. Laurie opens the door, they get in, and they just get out just in time. But she slams the door in his face, and it ends with Michael looking at Laurie through the window. And
it's awesome.
I just thought it was really, really nicely put together. I mean, in terms of the way the filmmaker has thought about how actions should be blocked through a horror scene and how the viewer is going to feel at certain sections. That was really nicely put together, and I would have liked to see a little bit more of that. But I do think that some of the horror scenes through the film and the end sequence as well are really effective and really save what could have been a calamity and into making something really rather fun, and which I enjoyed watching this with.
I got a sense of Aliens when she was trying to hide under the tables. It just reminded me of Newt hiding from the Alien Queen. The Alien Queen just lifting up all these things trying to find Newt, but in this case it's Michael on the tables, and then eventually, of course, he starts shoving everything out of the way. But it was very cool that they managed to sort of sneak a hide and seek sort of thing into this movie. But also, yeah, like you were saying, the fact that it did ratchet up that tension in that scene leading up to Michael and Laurie coming face to face. It was just beautifully executed.
Yeah, I think that's a high point of the film, that whole sort of section when they sort of let it loose. It's actually really nicely put together. I also quite like the way, and this is a theme for all the movies, that Michael sort of flips from being very clever and forward thinking in the way that he's stalking people and setting up murders. Then he flips to just being, sort of Frankenstein's monster style, lurching around with sort of zero coordination whatsoever and zero urgency and zero thought. I kind of see why that happens, because otherwise, if he's too sort of intelligent, then you've not got a movie. He's going to just take everyone out straight away. But it is sometimes a bit jarring for me, and it happens. It's not just a criticism of this film; it's criticism, I think, of Halloween in general. Is that sometimes Michael's super clever, and sometimes he's just an idiot,
super dumb.
Yeah, and there doesn't seem to be any continuity between, unless, of course, a victim or one of the protagonists needs to escape. Suddenly, Michael becomes dumb again, so it allows them to get out of it.
Well, let's move on to 2018. I remember when the trailer dropped, and I was like, "Oh, they're making another one, okay." And I thought it was going to be a continuation of the Rob Zombie thing, and they were just having Jamie Lee Curtis as like a cameo or something. And then I learned it was actually a direct sequel to the first one, so I got quite interested. Trip B and me actually went to go see it, and wow, that's all I'm going to say about that, because I like this movie too. But Ewan, can you just give us just a brief summary of 2018's Halloween, please?
I'll try and resist the temptation to look it up on Wikipedia. Essentially,
look, it's very concise. If you want us to look.
Now, essentially, this carries on from Halloween 1. It's a direct sequel, so every Halloween film in between is now defunct, apart from Halloween 3, of course, which happens completely different time and area and storyline.
Can I just get something off my chest about that? Did any of you guys watched it not knowing that it wasn't part of, had Michael Myers? Because I remember the first time I watched it, I was sitting there going, halfway in, when's Michael coming in? And then the moment the credits hit, I was like, fucking lie to me. This isn't a Halloween movie.
Actually, I think number 3 is the first one I ever watched. So yeah, it just, I don't know why that was. I think it was just on telly, so I just watched that one, and then that's what I thought Halloween films were. So it's a direct sequel to the first one, but Michael's been recaught. He's back in a mental institute where he's been for the last 40 years, and in that time, Laurie hasn't really adapted too well to life. She's sort of carrying the pain and the trauma of the first film's events, and it's sort of manifested itself in that she's tooled up, sort of Sarah Connor like, in preparation for a showdown which inevitably will happen. So she's and the consequences of that is that she's become semi-estranged with her daughter and her family, so it's had a real kind of emotional cost to her life, and she's not very well adjusted. So essentially, just quickly, the film starts with 2 podcasters.
I was going to say you need to say the line that the male podcaster says, like when they approach Laurie's property. He's talking through the intercom. He goes, we're making a podcast.
Now, hang on. I remember watching this 2 years ago, and before What If It's Cool was even a thought in my head, or even with us, I remember thinking, if someone came to me and said, we're making a podcast, I went, yep, fuck you, get away. I don't want anything to do with you. Like that, would you seriously take anyone seriously if you going through something that traumatic and someone comes up to you and says, "Oh yeah, I'm making a podcast about it"? Like, I wouldn't even give them the time of day. I'd just get lost.
Unless, of course, they're from the What If It's Cool podcast, then we would just get straight in the front gate.
Exactly. We want to be able to interview some movie stars one of these days.
Yeah, we want Carpenter on the pod in a future episode.
Please, Carpenter. Don't say fuck off just because of Dan.
Speaking of the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and on Instagram and on Twitter.
Well, he's cut us off. He's cut us off, Ewan. I don't think we've got enough time.
So yeah, they're used as a device to bring us up to speed with what Michael and Laurie have been doing in the intervening time between the events of the first movie and this new movie. And then we get a sort of recreation of the escape scene from the first film, and then Michael's out again, and then the action takes place in sort of traditional fashion up to a certain point in the film, which I guess we'll come to. My first sort of thoughts of this. Oh no, Tim, you tell me your first thoughts.
I was going to say that I found it quite chilling how when they visit Michael in the insane asylum, as soon as they pulled out the mask, and then everyone started going crazy around him, except for Michael, and even just the way that the mask is revealed, and then Michael just makes the barest of turns to acknowledge what's behind him. Like, I found it incredibly chilling, but then also, it was so eerie, like how everyone just started getting driven insane. It's sort of like he induces fear. It really just illustrates that fact that he can induce fear around everyone, anyone around him.
Are we going to ignore the fact that they've got the actual mask all the documentation. Like, where the hell did they
these
get that from?
podcasters. How did they get that? And they're also quite successful podcasters. They did a very revealing expose prior to taking on this particular case.
I like the opening scene too. I think it's a bit of a departure from the way that other Halloween films have been introduced, but it's nicely put together in terms of the editing. It's got a sort of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest beginning, and then it opens out into that big square, and as Tim says, that slight turn sort of just shows us sort of the kind of the rage inside of Michael is proliferates outwards and affects people around him. He's always had that kind of aura around him in previous films, and that's quite a good way to sort of render it with the sort of mad ramblings of other patients, and it builds quite nicely to the opening credits, where we have a callback to the
reverse time of the pumpkin, so it's reinflating. Yeah, I think that point, that's quite beautifully done, because it really just highlights to you that you're being taken back to this. You're being taken back to Halloween and the horror that Michael causes around him.
Yeah, and the camera slowly comes into that eye of the pumpkin as it sort of resurrects itself in the way that this film is resurrecting the franchise, and we've got the familiar typeface being used, and the music. We could really sort of talk about the music, which is obviously used in every Halloween film, but they stripped it back to the simplicity of the original sort of theme music. It's a little bit different, but it's essentially it's like almost like a sort of a ticking time bomb effect to it, sort of saying, something bad is going to happen very, very soon. Just sort of really opens out the film and sets you in that right frame of mind that you need to be in to enjoy a slasher horror.
Yeah, I think that the way that this film is set up, and then the way that it progresses, there are certain touchstones they rely on. So whereas H20 relied on callbacks to the genre as a whole, this one pays a lot of respect and almost has a reverence for the original. So with this, you see quite a lot of things that play out quite similarly to the original movie. One key scene that I thought was quite beautifully included was the fact that there's another classroom scene. All three films feature classroom scenes that are meant to have some significance. There's some foreshadowing, or there are some, like whatever's being discussed.
They talk about fate in them, don't they?
That's right. And whatever's discussed in them tends to be like a metaphor for what is going to happen. Like Michael is fate. He can't be avoided. In this one, instead, has she become a monster? That's what the podcasters are hypothesizing. And in fact, in the classroom scene, you see Laurie standing outside the window, similar to how Michael haunted her 40 years prior.
Yeah.
So it lends a lot of weight behind that theory that perhaps Laurie has, this rehabilitation through confrontation is what the podcaster said.
Was her granddaughter 17 as well?
I think she would be. To get into honor society, how old do you have to be? Like, would that be about
16, 17, I think.
I mean, there's a lot of similarities between the two of them, and what Laurie has drawn about them. She even says at the dinner scene that I was in honor society as well. And
the standard for teenagers in these movies have to be 17 or 18.
Yep.
Around that time. Yeah. I mean, Laurie's standing in exactly the same place that Michael was in the first film, isn't she? And in fact, I think that they put her into a Michael Myers position several times throughout the film. She's the one in this film where later on she goes over the balcony.
Yes.
In a direct sort of mirror of what happened in the first. And then, of course, when Michael goes to look to see whether she's there, she's not there, just like Michael is. And there's a great bit in the sort of towards the end of the film as well, where she sort of comes out of the darkness in the same way that Michael does in the first one.
Yep.
So I think adds a lot of credence to this idea that they are now sort of entwined forever in this kind of a dance where they will forever be fighting and forever be stalking each other.
There's this beautiful part, Yui, just to add to what you were saying, There's a shot that I remember from the original movie where after Laurie had taken the tumble down the stairs, so she'd gone over the guardrail.
Yeah.
You see the camera looking directly up at Michael.
Yes.
And similarly in this, like when Laurie has overheard that the bus has crashed, she opens up, like her, she moves her island kitchen bench, and it has the camera looking up at her from the stairs as well. And it just makes you think that her evolution from this horrific trauma that she's experienced is that, well, she's now becoming quite similar to the monster that hunted her. And Dr. Sartain actually says, I would suspect the notion of being a predator or the fear of becoming prey keeps both of them alive. So in order for either of them to walk away from this, one of them has to become the predator, and one of them has to eventually take the role of the prey. And the way that she ends up stalking him throughout the house in the concluding bits of the finale, it's inarguable that Laurie has now herself become a predator. She's now accustomed to the darkness that Michael once favored to be able to stalk all of his victims 40 years ago.
Can I just point out something about Dr. Sartain? Right, the moment he said his name, because the entire bit until he's reintroduced later on, going into the neighborhood, you don't know his name. The moment he says his name, and I remember the first time I watched this with Trip, I thought, hang on, did he just say his name is Dr. Satan? Like, and automatically, the moment I heard that, I went, "Yep, this guy's going to turn into an evil dude." Like, I think it like if you really listened to it and you were looking out for the cues, that you would have known, you would have sort of spotted it, and it foreshadowed it. Because I remember I said that to Trip, and Trip just looked at me, and goes, "Nah," that is. That's a pretty accurate Trip impression too.
He's foreshadowed. Yeah, I think that there's certainly something a bit off on him, even in those early scenes. I think that he's saying some rather overprotective lines to Michael as he's getting on the bus, saying, "Don't worry, Michael, I won't leave you.
I'll be by your side.
I'll be by your side the whole time." And it's all a little bit off, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's all a bit convenient that everyone dies except for him on the bus.
I think that mustache was a bit sus as well. The moment you see a guy with a mustache like that, you're like,
Yeah, don't trust him.
What evil are you going to do
him.
today?
I was thinking that, well, they needed to come up with something different for the role that would be filled. So you've got Dr. Loomis. How are you going to replace someone so iconic as him?
Well, he's convenient enough that he has a few monologues in that kind of monotone, gravelly voice, which is sort of feels your sort of Dr. Loomis fix, which is so effective in the first film. We've got to sort of mention Donald Pleasance, I guess, because he's so integral to the atmosphere.
The gravitas, it's not there with Dr. Sartain. I don't think Dr. Sartain could fill, and I think that they knew that. So for him to meet his grisly demise by having his face stomped into the next planet, well, I think for him to do that, the writers, the filmmakers, they actually would have thought, well, yeah, this guy's a stupid character. Let's kill him off.
Well, it comes back to like when we watched VFW. Remember how I said, like there was like a couple of punches and he just turned into goop? This one's just like one super kick to the face and gone.
You were mentioning the great horror bit with Michael in H20 and how he was terrifying Josh Hartnett and Michelle Williams' characters. I thought that this one, when the kids, Oscar and Allison, they're in the backyard, so they're trying to take they're trying to take a shortcut through this yard, and this guy decides that he wants to make a move on her. I thought it was incredibly fun and incredibly effective how they used the sensor lights.
Yeah.
That was so amazingly done. You felt the tension. You knew that Michael was going to be moving as soon as the lights switched off, and then when they'd come back, he'd be repositioned, and I found it very, very chilling.
Yeah.
That's probably the best sequence in the entire movie. Like the way it was executed, the way it was delivered was just, whoa.
Well, as soon as they introduced that motion light as the girl's walking off and leaving him alone with the motion light, you have that sort of sinking sensation, don't you? That well, we know where this is going to go, So yeah, I agree. I think there's some really nice sort of set pieces in this. The section where Michael claims the mask back from the podcasters.
Yes,
is really I think it's a callback as well, because I'm pretty sure that there's a similar bathroom scene in maybe Halloween 4. That's when this scene was introduced. It's not from the original, but there's a similar scene in H20 as well, where, sort of on the way to Haddonfield or Weatherford Town, we're going to have our main showdown. Mike always likes to make a stop off, get some crisps and a Coke, change clothes, murder someone, and get a new car. And this one, he picks up his old mask as well. But it's brutal. I mean, I thought that at least one of the podcasters was going to get out alive, but no. I mean, the main guy gets his head smashed against a wall, and then the other podcaster gets strangled. There's no mercy here.
Yeah, no. They show that he's even more indiscriminate in this, because in H20 he spares the life of the little girl and the mother who are in the restroom. He just takes the keys and then he steals their car.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, like, the only person that he spares is a baby.
Is the baby.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone else is fair game.
Yeah. And even then he turns to the baby and sort of thinks about it before moving. He's contemplating it in a really kind of sinister way. But then he just keeps on going, it's not worth it kind of way.
That bit, though, with the male podcaster, I think his name is Aaron, he's walking through the shop, and so it's got a mechanic's garage attached to it. And when you see, like, the side profile of the shop attendant, you see that his jaw has been ripped open.
Oof.
And then obviously it cuts, and then Michael's got, a handful of teeth which he drops over the stall door. But then Aaron he actually sees that the mechanic has had his overalls taken off him. It was like, this is so grisly. It's absolutely brutal. And this is just for him to get clothes and his mask.
Yeah. That set piece is brutal, and I also think that they pay homage to the sort of original Halloween setup in the midsection of the film, where there's a sort of a further tooling up scene for Michael, where he's sort of walking through the kids playing trick and treat. He's almost anonymous. No one really sees him. It's only when he sort of turns to, murder mode that a victim will see him. Otherwise, he can pretty much just walk through those streets. I mean, it's because everyone's in costume, but he can walk through those streets almost unnoticed. And he walks into a kitchen, picks up a hammer, and then we've got a copy, I guess, a homage to the tracking camera that you see in the first one.
Yeah.
He picks up a hammer, takes out an old lady at the table in just the coldest way. I mean, it's slightly off camera, but I don't think they could have done a hammer full on without the ratings going, well too high, and it's not necessary anyway. The crunching is enough to give you an idea of the brutality here, and then he moves on to and the whole purpose of that scene is for him to move from a hammer to a knife. He just drops the hammer. Says, I don't want that anymore. He grabs the knife, and then it follows
this is
him.
More for me.
Yeah, that's it. It's sort of, his traditional weapon. And then it follows him again up to the house next door, where you've got we assume probably a babysitter on the phone in traditional slasher movie style. And we see the whole next sequence through the window, which I think is very effective as well. He walks around the side of the house, and you sort of, the third man style, you see his shadow across the wall sort of getting larger and larger and larger of the window, so very much in front of camera, and brings down the blind, and then you see Michael coming up behind her and then just take her out from behind. And it's just so cold.
The knife just goes right through the throat. This is amazing makeup.
But here's the thing as well, like, why did you leave your back doors open? Like, the garage was open, the back door was open. Like, what were you thinking?
Films are very much like set in, middle America, the American dream, small town. You leave, you trust your neighbors, you leave your back doors open. That's why they're so effective, because no one thinks that, something bad's going to happen.
Oh, thank God we live in Australia, because like I grew up in a small town in New South Wales called Tokemore, and even from a very young age, you know, my parents always said lock the doors. So I'm like, okay, cool.
With regards to the original Halloween, Sheriff Brackett even says it. He says it to Dr. Loomis. He goes, you know what Haddonfield is? You know, it's families and all that sort of thing.
Lined up in rows.
That's right.
Like
and then
ready for a slaughter, pretty much.
Yeah, you're meant to get a feeling that horror, like on this level, serial killer level, is not meant to take place in a small town. But here in this movie, of course, it does.
And that's what makes it even. It is. I mean, who's to stop someone from doing it?
Yeah. So it was done incredibly well. I think that this movie was more chilling and more disturbing than H20, and it didn't have that polished look to the colors weren't as vibrant. It didn't pop so much. So yeah, like when you looked at this, I kind of thought that it hewed closer to the look of the original.
Certainly does. With the lighting, is back to the sort of traditional Halloween Carpenter style lighting, where it's very minimal, and the lighting usually in the houses comes from like a single lamp, like a desk lamp, or maybe even a character in a room, and they're only being lit from a light in a room in another portion of the house, which is great because then you can highlight certain parts of the frame to either hide Michael or to highlight him wherever he is. Or the effect is because you can't see large parts of the frame which are in darkness, you begin to sort of, as a viewer, see Michael everywhere because you never know where he's going to pop up. So yeah, this new one is very much in the same vein as the originals.
Was there anything that you guys didn't like about 2018's Halloween?
Off the top of my head, no, but I have a feeling that we're going to start talking about how Karen, the daughter, was used.
Yeah, it's really weird because all the way through the movie, she's more shown as very sympathetic, very
naive almost.
Yeah, naive. I was going to say something different, but naive is probably the better word. And, you know, it gets to the point where she's terrified. She's trying to calm down, you know, her daughter. But even then, she's got tears in her eyes and everything. And then the moment you get to that one scene where she's, you know, holding up her shotgun. Was it a shotgun? No, rifle.
Yes.
And then she's like, I can't do it. I can't. And then Michael pops up and he goes, and then she first turns and goes, gotcha, bang. I'm like, what?
She tricked him.
She looks very familiar to this girl that I knew. And the girl that I knew, she knows how to play it up. So that's what I was thinking. Like, you know, she could pretend certain things really well. And I get what you mean, like in terms of it almost coming off as comedic. Like it doesn't have a sort of catharsis to it because you never expected this out of the character to begin with. You only get a sense of it when she says that, you know, when she was 8, she learned how to shoot. She learned how to fight. By the time she was 12, she was taken away from Laurie by social services. It's hard to buy into the fact that she's able to fire a rifle that convincingly.
Mm.
But it also made me think, was this a plan all along? Was this something that Laurie had basically etched into her daughter's being? That one day the boogeyman is going to come for us. The shape is going to return. And when he does, this is the plan. And I just sort of thought, look, I can suspend a bit of disbelief for this. That, yeah, like, you know, it really all was just a ruse on Karen's character's part. That she was just to pretend to lure Michael in, and then when Michael thought that he had the jump on them, boom, just shoots him. But I will add that of all the shots to make, why would you shoot just for the neck? So maybe the muscle memory wasn't that great. Maybe her aim was off and then she shot for the neck, but then that then allows that awesome scene that Ewan just mentioned a bit earlier. The lighting just suddenly gives way to reveal part of Laurie's face. Laurie says, "Happy Halloween, Michael." Then gets the jump on him, stabs him.
I think it's got a couple of purposes to do that. I mean, one, it subverts this sort of general idea, which, I mean, slasher movies are criticised largely because of their portrayals of female characters. So it's a subversion of that where she's acting in the sort of, I guess, in a more traditional victim-y type way. But actually, she's in control the whole time. And she's just waiting for Michael to reveal himself so she can take him out. So I didn't mind it so much in that way. I think it was, you know, and clever. I also think that it was believable because she's kind of like the John Connor character to Laurie's Sarah Connor. Like, you know, the first film, she was green, and since then they've been preparing. And so she talks a bit about her childhood being paranoid because, you know, the only thing that she's been instilled into her by her mother is that, you know, one day the boogeyman's going to come to get you, so you need to get ready now. And I think it follows logically that if she's then taken away by social services and they say, well, actually, your mother's a bit of a wacko and, you know, the world's not like that, it's actually full of love and light, that she would rebel against that in her adult life.
I kind of think that look that Karen shot towards the gun, so when they know that Michael's actually going to come into the basement and kill them, she looked at the gun, which had her initials etched on it, and it was almost like a knowing glance, and also
it triggers
sort
something,
of,
doesn't it?
Yeah, and recognizing Mum was right all along. You know, so then she obviously reaches for that, and then she takes that shot. I think it was pretty chilling, actually, the way that the movie ended. And I just wanted to close on this particular note. They're all sitting in the back of that pickup that's managed to take them while the house is burning. Super chilling, by the way, that Michael just stood at the bottom of those steps when he's trapped in the cage in the basement, just staring up at them in silence, and as the flames engulf him. But it was also very disturbing, somewhat, that, you know, all three of the Strode women are just sitting there in the back.
Is that a reference to Texas Chainsaw Massacre as well, in the way that movie ends? I think they jump onto the back of a truck.
They jumped on the back of a truck, but she was manically laughing at the end.
And you don't see who the driver is.
Yeah.
For me, the fact that the camera then chooses to linger on the blade that's being held by Allison, and then it closes off before it goes to black there, that to me just felt as though it was, one, referencing the original when Michael was on the lawn as a boy and took off his mask and he was just standing there in silence holding the blade.
That's quite chilling interpretation.
Two, I just thought, well, perhaps this is a sign that, you know, this particular trauma has triggered something in Allison's character. You know, she's meant to be, you know, the pure granddaughter of Laurie. You know, of course, I mean, you know, she takes part in, you know, doing some drugs, and she's got a boyfriend and what have you. Honor society student, but perhaps she's now going to be on a path that's it could either veer towards what Laurie's like, or it could even just go completely the opposite direction and be a bit like Michael.
Cycles of trauma do pass through generations, don't they? And we tend to sort of push our neurosis down onto the generation below us, and then it comes out in either similar cycles or unexpected ways. So I think that reading is completely valid. Did you think that actually this film, when the Doctor reveals himself as being sort of a bit wacko himself and wants to see Michael out in the wild, and that sort of triggers a change to the film, and it goes from being a sort of a traditional Halloween setup into a more kind of cabin in the woods style setup. Did you feel that it actually becomes sort of a different film? Probably not in a good way. I don't think that the whole kind of Michael walks into sort of a scary Home Alone type scenario with a house full of traps ready to take him out it really worked for me in the way that I think it probably could have done. It was an interesting way to take it, and I guess they were sort of leading up to that, you know, Laurie and Michael had to have this final showdown, but it's very much on her terms. I'm just not sure if it was really as compelling as it could have been. I didn't understand why she was so adamant to turn all the lights off in the house. So she ended up having a very dark house to try and find Michael in, and that wasn't to her advantage at all. And she seemed to have mannequins in the bedroom, which were just... Why
would you have them? Why would you have those mannequins?
I know, they were just there just as as false Michaels. You know, you start seeing, again, you start in the darkness, you start seeing Michael everywhere. And one of the things which I noticed when I was watching it the other day was in all of her rooms, she had the closet with the slats. Now, if I was her after the trauma of the first film, there's absolutely no way that I would have been picking out those particular closets for my own house. So it didn't really ring true for me.
I think what this movie has tried to do is basically show that the roles are now going to be reversed. Nothing's going to be in Michael's favor as much as, well, things aren't going to be in Michael's favor as much as he may think it is, or as much as the audience or even Laurie would think it is. Laurie has done everything she could in the past 40 years to prepare for a showdown with him. Physically, I don't think she would be, anywhere near a match for Michael. Like, he's just raw power.
No one is. No one is, are they?
No one is. I mean, he's able to rip people's heads off or like crush them under his boot heel, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
But she's tricked out the house, and yes, it is very much like Home Alone. But I found it to be more believable in terms of, helping to bring the odds back in her favor a little bit. She's got all the guns. She's got she can close off different sections of the house. I found that this sort of fight or flight was a bit more believable compared to Laurie 20 years prior in the H20 film, even though this isn't a direct sequel to that, where she just decides, you know what, I'm fed up with this. I'm gonna go take him out. And then she just takes on Michael hand to hand. I was like, nah, he'd wipe the floor with you.
Yeah, that's quite valid. I think, and it's a modern take on it, is it, that the victim can find that strength within themselves, even if they need, a large amount of their lives to prepare. She's ready for this moment, and it's definitely a better way of portraying characters in general, not as just fodder.
Yeah.
So I mean, make some good points. I just, in terms of the way that the action sort of unfolds in that last scene, I'm not sure if it's as entertaining as it probably could be, and as cheesy as the H20 version is, in that they have this ridiculous bit where she steals a gun steals a gun from a cop, and then steals a van with him in the back, and then keeps on driving while he's waking up, and then drives the van off a cliff, and then Michael somehow gets caught between trees. It's all ridiculous. I kind of liked it for its silliness. I don't know whether that was intentional or not.
I think both endings are very, very silly.
It doesn't read as well as you're saying, Timmy, but yeah. I just, in terms of the silliness, I think I enjoyed the uber silly over the half silly.
Well, Dan, did you want to ask us the all important question?
I think it's pretty unanimous. But firstly, Halloween H20 20 years later, is it cool?
Just for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna say just.
Yui?
It depends how you judge these things. If you're like me and you like to watch a horror movie, which is a lot of fun on a Sunday afternoon, then yeah, definitely it's cool. Grab it and enjoy. I mean, it's not Citizen Kane or anything, so I'm not sure if it's a great film, but there's a lot of fun to be had here, and there's some great set pieces. It's brutal in many ways, and it's great seeing some of these actors who become real sort of Hollywood mainstays in their sort of early career. So there's a lot to like. I'm not sure if it'd be anywhere near the higher echelons of horror movies, but it's worth a watch.
I think it's cool. I really enjoyed it. I just hate the ending, but then again, I hate the ending of both of them, so it's unanimous for that one. 2018's Halloween. What do we think? Is it cool?
Very, very. I found that after repeated rewatches of 2018, that it just holds up for me as a film. I definitely like that it didn't have like all the Easter eggs of H20, but it definitely referenced the original, and there is a real respect and a real love for the original. And I think that's what won me over even more. But also for me, I just found that it played well. Like there is some downtime. Like, so what I liked about the original was that it doesn't feel like there's anything wasted in it. And in fact, like there's a lot to love as far as the characters. But 2018, I found that it had such a similar sort of pace, and it really did know how to ratchet up the tension, and also just deliver some effective scares and set pieces. So yeah, 2018 definitely won me over, and I'm very excited to see what Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, the sequels, are going to be like.
Yeah, That'll be interesting. Yui?
Yeah, I liked my second watching of it more than my first. It has some excellent set pieces, and yes, it pays a lot of homage to the first one and a lot of respect. I think that it kind of goes off the rails in the third part of the film, which not for want of trying something new, but I just don't think that it delivered in the way that it possibly could. I'm still looking forward to new versions leading on from this. I think they've opened themselves up to a lot of possibilities. But I mean, just as a final note, I mean, if you really want to see a masterclass in horror, just go watch the first one if you've not seen it, because it's it's not any way as brutal, and it's not, well, it is, but not graphically as brutal. It's a lot more measured. It's a real sort of film school classic favorite film to talk about for a reason, and the reason is that the filmmaking, the pacing, the sound, the camera, the action, the lighting, all the elements are concise and measured, thought out. So I would go see the first one first, and then these two, they're also fun. They're both cool in their way.
I think that 2018 does miss out on having as memorable character as Annie Brackett.
That's true.
I think Annie was quite possibly one of my favorites in the original, and just that her line readings are the best.
she's just a great performance as a sort of horrible friend.
I don't think you're smart. Kind. I think you're wacko.
Ben Tramer. Oh.
Well, for me, it's definitely cool. But again, I don't like the ending. I don't like the ending of either of them. Now, the biggest debate. Now, normally when we do these versus series, we say, which one's cooler? The premise for this one, though, is a little bit different, because obviously the stories are very different, because in H2O, Laurie is the sister of Michael, while in 2018's adaptation, she is suffering from PTSD, and she's clearly just the victim of all this. Which storyline do you prefer? Because for me personally, I think it's a better storyline to have Laurie as her sister. It didn't execute that well on H2O too much, obviously, but I actually love that sort of a storyline for that, and it made more sense to me. How about you guys?
It's difficult to tell. I'm not sure if I could come down firmly on either side. I'm just, as an instinct, I think I prefer H2O's version, even though it is silly. I just think that it rings more true to the character from the original in terms of Laurie's story arc. But I mean, there is a realism in the new one, which is, I guess, is more believable. It's a difficult question, but I'll go H2O.
I think that with H2O, because it's a continuation of part 2, and I only read up on this because I haven't seen Halloween 2 in such a long time, but Halloween 2 was where they started hinting at some sort of supernatural, so the cult of Samain being the reason why Michael has supernatural powers. So H2O can play around with that a little bit more. And you definitely see it, well, whenever he gets attacked or knocked down, he's only temporarily stunned. So yeah, like it is able to use the fact that he's, well, superhuman a lot better than the 2018 version. But I personally don't really mind whether or not, well, actually, before I make that point, I do like the fact that he's superhuman, because there are a few times where he sits up, sort of like the Undertaker. So I just
God.
That I think is very cool. I was like, wow, okay, he's doing a bit of an Undertaker sort of thing.
Bringing up that Undertaker reference?
Jeez. Don't even say that, because you're a bigger wrestling fan than me, so you can't talk shit about it.
I think there's the relentlessness of Michael just getting up and getting up and getting up is part of the terror of him.
Yes, and well, I mean, so he's more superhuman, I find, in H20, but yeah, like, I don't really mind him being the brother of Laurie Strode or not. But I think having her, well, I think she played the PTSD and the trauma very well. And I think that particular performance is a stronger performance from Jamie Lee Curtis than her characterization in the H20 film.
100% agree with that. 100%
I'm still going to be in favor of the 2018 one.
I think the script for her is a lot better she's got more to work with in the latest 2018 one. Yeah, I don't think that whether or not she's related to Michael or not has a huge bearing on. I mean, plot wise it does, but I don't think it actually affects the effectiveness of, for want of a better word, of either film.
I think the psychology was really engaging throughout the 2018 iteration. Like I do just, there's just something about it that speaks to, like, I think the smarter horror approach of the first film. So the first film, like, obviously dealt with an escaped mental patient, and, you had Dr. Loomis feeding you about, like the psychosis, well, not really psychosis, but really that there's nothing there beyond evil for Michael. Whereas in this, like, how has the evil affected someone? And in it, you see that the evil's affected this person because it's forced them to be almost like a doomsday prepper.
Yeah.
Very fatalist sort of approach that, nothing she does will ever turn her away from the fact that she and Michael are going to be fated to meet once again.
I think that there's a lot more meat to the bones of the psychology of the newer one, 2018 version. Whereas H20 is quite shallow in terms of its plot and the psychology and the thought process behind it. It's really just a sort of a vehicle for some people to get killed and for Laurie and Michael to do their dance again. Whether that makes it, in the end of the day, a more fun or entertaining watch is debatable. They both have qualities, and they both have highs and lows in them.
Well, the best callback from 2018 that I found was, when the kids are just walking down the street and they said, "Oh, wasn't your grandmother like related to him?" And she goes, "Nah, that was only myth. That wouldn't make sense at all." I'm just like, that's funny, and I like that line.
It makes it scarier. It makes it scarier because that he's actually a human. That he's indiscriminate. He's just going to kill whoever. And I think that, exactly. As we see in this, he does away with multiple people in very graphic fashion. It's
a necessary line as well, because for many viewers would have watched, not necessarily everything in sequence, aren't going to know whether or not in this iteration she is related or not related, or which chronology we are following. So, yeah, it certainly helped me out when I was watching it. Like, I was like, is she the sister here, or what's going on? And then so it was a very sort of, full-on line. Okay, right. So number 2 didn't happen. Right, okay, now I know where we're at.
Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, Castbox, and of course iTunes. And while you're there, leave us a like and review. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and enable those notifications. Make sure to follow us on Facebook at What If It's Cool Podcast, tweet us at What If It's Cool, and find us on Instagram at What If It's Cool Podcast. Keep that support going. And until next time, folks, we'll catch you on the next cast. Peace.